Hello, JBS viewers. I'm David Harris, and this is Defending Israel. Another very special guest joins us today, a good friend, Ambassador Emmanuel Nahshon, currently the Deputy Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry for Public Advocacy, and in a long diplomatic career that spans more than 30 years, he has served in Caracas, in Ankara, in Berlin, most recently as the Israeli ambassador to Belgium and Luxembourg, before taking on his particularly important and timely position right now. Emmanuel, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
So, Emmanuel, it's a difficult question to frame. It's a more difficult question to answer, but since October the 7th, every Israeli has lived multiple lives. You've had your personal life, your family life, your life as a citizen of Israel in responding to October 7th, but you've also had to go to a daily job, a job that's probably consumed much, if not most, of your days and weeks, of course. You're dealing with public advocacy. You're a face and a voice of Israel to the world. How have you managed to juggle both jobs under these extraordinary emotional circumstances?
Well, actually, no one expected October 7th, and there was no way to prepare for it. What I've been doing actually, and I know that it's not particularly healthy, but I think that I've had no other choice, is to put the job before everything else. Because defending Israel at this moment in time is more important than any other issue that we have to deal with, be it on the personal level or on the professional level. We face a unique challenge, which the Jewish people and the state of Israel has not faced since many, many years. And we need to be strong. We need to be united. We need to be strong. And this is what I'm working at in my job, in my current position as Deputy Director General for Public Diplomacy or Public Advocacy. I'm making sure that the voice of Israel is heard around the world, and also that we keep being sensitive to the messages that we receive from the world.
So I want JBS viewers, first of all, if they aren't already doing so, to follow Emmanuel Nahshon on X or Twitter and the other platforms, because his message is important. What are the particular challenges that you faced since October 7th in getting that message out from Israel?
Well, there are many challenges, and I will start by talking about antiSemitism, which has been on the rise around the world and which is a major challenge also for us to here in Israel. I think that October 7th has been the trigger for so many negative phenomena related to Israel and related to the Jewish people. You see a level of hatred like never before. A level of animosity, particularly among young people in the United States, in other places in the world. We are positioned in a way which does not correspond to our reality. And what I'm fighting for is the right not only to convince people that Israel is right in our actions following October 7th, but in something much more basic and fundamental, which is the right to show what is Israel and to explain our positions, regardless of whether we manage to convince or not. And this is extremely difficult. This is something that we try to do on social media platforms, using also conventional media platforms, conferences, etc., because it is very important for people to understand what is Israel and what is it that we are facing following October 7th.
So some still try to argue that being critical of Israel is not equivalent to anti-Semitism. What do you say to them?
Well, I say to them that it's perfectly legitimate to criticize this or that policy of the Israeli government. This is something that Israeli citizens do all the time. But legitimacy stops at a certain point, and the point in which it stops is when you put into question the right of existence of the State of Israel. You can criticize as much as you want, but don't criticize the existence of the State of Israel, because if you do that, then of course you are an anti-Semite. Because you would not criticize the right of existence of any other nation in the world, and there is no reason to do this particular exception against the Jewish people.
But your critics argue that you have been accused of genocide, and any nation that practices genocide, by definition, becomes an illegitimate nation. How do you respond to that?
Well, the response is very easy, and we saw it, by the way, in the ICJ proceedings in The Hague. Israel is not committing a genocide. It's absolute nonsense to say that we commit a genocide. What we do is that we protect our citizens, we protect our country by fighting the terrorists who, on October 7th, demonstrated and showed us exactly what a genocide would look like. We have been subjected to a small demonstration of what a genocide of the Jewish people in Israel would look like if those people were ever to win. So we are in the situation of the victim, and we exercise extreme caution in fighting against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. We have no reason and no purpose and no aim at harming the innocent Gazan population. Our focus is on Hamas and on the Hamas terrorists, and we do our utmost, more, by the way, than any other army in the world, in order to make sure that we do not harm civilians. So accusing us of genocide is absolutely preposterous. And it shows exactly what are the instruments that our enemies are using in order to try and transform the State of Israel into something illegitimate. And when I say our enemies, and we can discuss this a bit longer, it is not only Hamas, by the way. It goes way beyond Hamas. It's Iran, it's the Muslim Brothers, and to a certain extent, it's Russia and China who profit from this new crisis in order to try and destabilize even more Western democracies.
And how would you explain the fact that South Africa took the lead on the genocide issue in the International Court of Justice? Why South Africa?
Well, I understand that there are very close connections between the ANC, which is the ruling party in South Africa, and Hamas. Are those ideological connections, financial connections? A lot remains to be checked with regard to that. But this is probably the reason. They owe them. And they want to please them. So they went on behalf of Hamas to the International Court of Justice. South Africa has willingly become a spokesperson, a voice for Hamas in international organizations. And I think that this is really not very flattering for this particular country.
Point well made. Another country that energetically supported South Africa, Emmanuel, is Turkey. And Israel, especially in the last several decades, has had an on-again, off-again relationship with Turkey. Where does that relationship stand today?
Well, it stands in a very, very complex position because Turkey is clearly part of the Muslim Brotherhood. When you check, when you try to see in which countries in the world currently Muslim brothers are in power, you will see that it is in Turkey, in Qatar, and in the Gaza Strip. So obviously they have an ideological connection to Hamas. And they use also anti-Semitism as a political internal instrument. Whenever Mr. Erdogan faces elections, he will try to encourage expressions of anti-Semitism, thinking that this will actually make him more popular in his own country. And actually, he's probably right. It does make him more popular in his own country. And so the relation with Turkey is extremely complex. On the one hand, we have very good trade relations with Turkey, and there is a good basis for further relations. On the other hand, there is this instrumentalization of Israel for internal purposes, and also in order to fulfill the aspirations of Mr. Erdogan, who wants to portray himself as the leader of the Muslim world. So it's an extremely complex situation. I had the occasion to serve previously in Ankara as an Israeli diplomat, and I know the importance of Turkey, the strategic importance of Turkey for the region. So I would certainly not advocate cutting our relations with this country, because it is an important country. On the other hand, there are certain things that we cannot accept, and this is exactly why, for the moment, we are reducing our diplomatic profile in Turkey, and we are reducing also the scope of our dialogue with the Turks.
Emmanuel, you mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood more than once. I just want to be sure that all our JBS viewers understand exactly what the Muslim Brotherhood is. Please explain.
Okay, the Muslim Brotherhood actually is a political movement. It's a political movement of extreme Sunni Islamists. They belong to the Sunni majority, that is the majority of Muslims who practice or who have the Sunni beliefs, and they are extreme in their positions, by the way, not only with regard to Israel, but in a general way. Those are the people who would like Islam to be the law of the state. Those are the people who believe in Sharia. Those are the people who believe that it is legitimate to use violence against non-believers. So you find them in vast quantities in countries such as Egypt, in Saudi Arabia also, in certain Gulf states and particularly Qatar. And as I mentioned, Hamas is a very good example. Hamas is actually an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, and many of the things, of the ideological discourses of Hamas come from this ideology of the Muslim Brothers.
You also mentioned Qatar. Speaking of complicated countries, on the one hand, Qatar has placed itself at the center of negotiations for the hostages. On the other hand, you mentioned its affiliation to the Muslim Brotherhood, and we've seen here in the United States its attempt to penetrate universities, politics, and achieve influence. So what exactly is Qatar in the current context for Israel?
Well, Qatar is certainly not a friend. It's an important country in this particular context because they are among the few countries who have some kind of influence over Hamas. And in that sense and to that extent, they are important because to us, retrieving our hostages is our number one priority. So whoever can help us achieve this objective is someone that we will be willing to talk to, even if it's the devil. We will talk to the devil if it helps us bring our prisoners, our hostages back home. And we do need this dialogue with Qatar. On the other hand, it's impossible to hide that this country is not a friend. It is at the service of enemies of the state of Israel, such as Hamas, and it has to be dealt with also in such a way.
Much less attention has been paid, at least here in the United States, to the 6 countries that are in the circle of peace with Israel. From Egypt and Jordan to the UAE and Bahrain to Morocco and Sudan. Again, at the risk of generalizing, since October 7th, how have those relations been affected, Emmanuel?
Well, those relations have been affected dramatically and in a negative way. Those are things which have to be said in the clearest possible way. The logic of those relations was based first and foremost on the state of Israel being a strong country and bringing advantages to the relations with those countries. When you ask the leaders of Morocco, Sudan, the Gulf states, etc., why is it that they want to have good relations with Israel? The answers are always security, high-tech, agriculture, etc., because they want to have a strong ally in the region. It's not because they like us particularly, and this also needs to be said. Now, on October 7th, we demonstrated exactly the opposite. October 7th is a demonstration of Israeli weakness. And as long as we do not manage to show clearly that we are strong, they will keep considering us as weak, and they will not strengthen the relations with us. We understand and we know for a fact that in order for those relations to go back to the place in which they were before October 7th, we will need to demonstrate our strength. If we do not, and to speak in very concrete terms, if we do not destroy Hamas and kill its leaders, I think that no one in the region will be interested in relations with Israel. As simple as that.
But to be clear, those countries that I mentioned want to see Hamas destroyed. Is that correct?
Absolutely. They want
though
to
they
see
may
Hamas
not say
destroyed.
it as openly as you're saying it.
And they will not do anything about it. They want to see Hamas destroyed, and not only so publicly, they will say whatever they say, and privately they will say whatever they say, but they will not do anything in order to help us destroy Hamas. So basically, we are facing Hamas alone. We will have to destroy Hamas, first of all, for the sake of the state of Israel, because this also needs to be said. I can hardly think of a stable and prosperous future for the state of Israel if we do not destroy Hamas.
Right.
Because if we do not do that, then they will attack us again and again and again. If it's not them, it will be Hezbollah or it will be somebody else. And we will not be able to have a normal life in Israel. So we need to destroy Hamas for our own sake, but we need to destroy Hamas also in order to continue this process of regional reconciliation and regional normalization. If we think of future relations with a big country such as Saudi Arabia, it's obvious that first and foremost, Hamas needs to be destroyed.
So you said we need to destroy Hamas, we need to be aware of Hezbollah, and then you added, or somebody else. The somebody else, the elephant in the room, is obviously Iran. In the Wall Street Journal,
Yes.
the columnist Walter Russell Mead, who writes on foreign affairs, has just written in recent days that the West's approach to Iran, and specifically the American, has been catastrophic in its misreading of Iran. From October
Yes.
7th on, Emmanuel, Israeli leaders have been talking about Iran. Do you think
Absolutely.
the message has now gotten through, thanks to Red Sea attacks in Iraq, attacks in Jordan? Will we see a change in Western policy towards Iran?
Well, I think so, because I think that...
By the way, are you being attacked by a dog or cat through the open door, or I saw the...
Yes. That was a dog attacking me, but it's okay. The dog is safely elsewhere.
Okay, and you're fine.
And I'm all right.
Okay, we don't have to deploy JBS troops to rescue you.
No, don't worry. Actually, I kept it with me, but it wanted to go elsewhere, but everything is fine. Now, coming back to Iran, I think that it's clear that Western nations have seen a demonstration of the negative influence of Iran. They see it through those direct attacks of Iran against American forces, or using proxies in Iraq, in Syria, and certainly the Houthi attacks from Yemen to the Red Sea. So I think that everyone has seen in a very clear way what is this negative influence and this negative power of Iran. Now, does it mean that we will see soon a world coalition or a civilized world coalition combating Iran? The answer is no. I think that what we will see probably is an attempt to combat the proxy forces, namely the Houthis in Yemen and the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria. This is probably what we are going to see in the times to come. I don't think that we will see any more than that, because a direct confrontation with Iran would imply probably a war on a large scale, and this is something that the Western powers do not wish for.
Understood. But then how do you effectively send a message of strong deterrence and determination by the West if the Iranians understand that the West will touch the periphery, the satellites, but not the head of the snake?
Well, this is a very good question, and this is exactly the issue that we are discussing with our American friends and also with certain Western powers, with the UK and France particularly, because the message needs to pass in a very, very clear way, and for the moment it's not passing. For the moment, the Iranians continue believing that they can become stronger in this part of the world. They see the American positioning as an expression of weakness, and they continue and they try their luck time and time again. And of course, this is a challenge not only to the United States, but to all of us. If the Houthis keep blocking naval trade on the Red Sea, then it's not only an American problem, it's a problem for all of us. So we are looking now at something which is dangerous. I would say that this region is highly unstable, and since October 7th has become even more so. So we are in a situation of high instability. We, Israel, are doing our utmost in order to limit the conflict to Hamas in Gaza. Of course, if Hezbollah in Lebanon will start a war, then we will have no choice but to respond. But our position is to try and reduce the tensions as much as possible.
Emmanuel, in our remaining minutes, I want to ask you at least two more questions. The first, very much in the news suddenly, is UNRWA. UNRWA has been there since 1950. Some of us have been talking about UNRWA, but suddenly it's a headline. UNRWA complicity with Hamas. What's your view on UNRWA? Must Israel live with it because it fulfills a key role for the Palestinians on the ground? Can Israel live without it? Can it be reformed? Is it beyond reform? What do you say?
Okay. We have been advocating for a very long time for the end of UNRWA as it is in its current configuration, and actually UNRWA becoming a part of the general UN mechanism taking care of refugees.
Which is UNHCR.
Exactly, because what your viewers need to understand is that actually UNRWA is something very special and very different from all the other agencies dealing with refugees. In the case of UNRWA, there is a perpetuation of the status of refugee. You are a refugee. If you are a refugee, then your son and your grandson and your great-grandson will be a refugee as well, benefiting from this status of refugee, but actually also not being able to start a new life. There are many refugees all over the world, and they receive help and they receive assistance in order to start a new life. This is not the case here. Here there is a perpetuation of the status of refugee also in terms of mentality and education. This is why you have people 75 years after our war of independence who still tell us, look, you are nothing but transients here, you are going to disappear, and we are going to come back to those places that we had to leave in 1948 because we started a war against you. So there is something fundamentally wrong here. And by the way, it's the UNRWA education system which contributed also to October 7th. This total hatred towards Israel, towards the Jews, is also something which contributed to the massacre of October 7th.
Well, let's see if the current focus on UNRWA can actually lead to that, what would be extraordinary transition in redefining what a refugee is for the Palestinians, and also in terms of resettlement, which is not currently part of the mandate of UNRWA. But I want to turn to another issue which is close to your heart and mine. You're originally from France. My parents met in France and lived in France. Are we witnessing a de-Judaization of the Holocaust? We have seen in recent days, since Holocaust Remembrance Day, no less than the Secretary General of the United Nations issuing a statement which made no reference to Jews as victims in the Holocaust, much less to anti-Semitism or to October 7th. You tweeted about, and so did I, the Irish Foreign Ministry statement, which again deleted Jews from the picture. Is this something we need to be concerned about? Is this a trend?
Well, let me give you a more complex answer. First of all, I think that it's quite clear to all of us that the umbrella of protection that the Jewish people benefited from after the Shoah has disappeared. I think that we enjoyed 2 or 3 generations in which, particularly in the Western world, the Jewish people was cherished and protected because of the atrocity of the Shoah. This is no longer the case for a variety of reasons, linked also to Muslim migration into Europe and other places as well. It's related also to the most unfortunate perception of Jews as white privileged. And this is a new phenomenon that we see in the American left.
And quite absurd, totally absurd.
Totally absurd in the last years. And there is also, I think, a politically correct, an attempt to be politically correct by not mentioning Jews in order not to annoy the Palestinians or the Arabs. And then the result is those bland and meaningless statements in which they speak of the Shoah without mentioning the Jewish people. It's pure and simple hypocrisy. It's something that we should not take for granted. It's something that we should combat, and we should say it in the clearest possible way, because otherwise it will keep repeating itself. What is a new phenomenon which started this year could become a kind of a routine in which Holocaust Remembrance Day is a kind of a day in which people remember bad things without even knowing what is it that they remember.
So well said.
So it's dangerous.
And the last question, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but Israel's national anthem, I'll even say theme song, is Hatikva, the hope. What's your hope for the day after?
Well, we will need to rebuild our country. I think that, if there is one silver lining in this terrible cloud of October 7th, it's the fact that we Israelis have demonstrated our resilience and our strength. And when I say Israelis, by the way, I don't mean only the Jewish population in Israel, but also the Arab population in Israel, which made a clear choice to be Israeli. And I think that we will need to redefine our relations within our country. We will need to redefine our identity, and we will need to solve also this outstanding conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, because at the end of the day, this is the basis for those terrible things which happened. So there is a lot to do. There is a lot of work to do here internally in Israel. This is what we are focusing on because solving the big issues of the world is not always easy. But I can tell you that the Israeli civil society has demonstrated its strength and resilience. And people are volunteering, and they are helping each other. And we have a country which, despite the political infighting that we had seen also before October 7th, I think is more united than before. And it is something that we should preserve and cherish and build on in order to have a better Israel.
Lots of reasons for hope, though a tall order. Emmanuel, thank you. JBS viewers,
thank you very much.
What a special half-hour discussion with an exceptional, articulate, passionate Israeli diplomat, Emmanuel Nahshon. This is David Harris, defending Israel. See you next time.